Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you for. So, as you all know, we just returned from Govardhan and now we are getting the direct blessings of Prabhu. And we are so happy to thank you, Prabhu. Welcome back. And do we have any newcomers first time who are coming to the temple? Your name?
Sharif.
Sharif. And how did you hear about us?
My friend's been telling me to come for years.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome. You're welcome. Thank you, Prabhu. So this is what we do every Sunday at 11 o'clock. We start with the ecstatic kirtan. At 11:30 we will have a 1 hour discourse, and I will introduce the speaker today. And at around 12:30 we have a stand-up kirtan, another ecstatic kirtan. Don't miss that. And around 1 o'clock we break for some prayers and local announcements, followed by the most important vegetarian sanctified food. So please stay for the whole program with us. And today's discourse will be given by Her Grace Rukmini Devi Dasi. And the subject for today is have patience with wisdom. A short introduction to Agnes Rukmini Devi Dasi was introduced to Krishna consciousness from childhood. She grew up going to ISKCON Denver and then ISKCON Los Angeles. In 1991, Srila Bhakti Pramod Puri Goswami gave her first initiation, and 2006, Srila Bhakti Vallabh Goswami gave her second initiation. She has a PhD in mathematics and now lives in Columbus, Ohio, where she works as a data scientist. Rukmini Devi Dasi has been teaching Krishna consciousness publicly since 2013. She has been giving temple classes at ISKCON Columbus since 2015 and participates in other services such as Columbus Bhakti Yoga Outreach Group. She currently serves as one of the secretaries of SAC, the Shastric Advisory Council of ISKCON. She is co-authoring a book with Her Grace Srila Devi Dasi, Dr. Rukmini Best, Career Dharma, the natural art of work, to appear with me. Thank you for this. So that's a very short introduction of Mataji's qualifications. I just call her walking encyclopedia. For Vaishnava scriptures, she is very well read in all the scriptures. So thank you. Thank you. You want to come forward? You want to come forward? Yeah, come. Yeah. Very good.
Like this? Am I supposed to, is it supposed to be on?
Like a headphone.
Oh, like this?
Yeah, bring it forward.
Okay. Is it audible?
Yeah,
now?
it's fine.
Yeah.
So first we sing some preliminary prayers. Jai Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Shiva Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Shri Radha Natabar, Shri Gaurnita, Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. And then I will say my own preliminary prayers. So we try to thank our teachers and invoke their blessings before starting. So, Om Jnanatirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Namo Vishnupadaya Shri Gaura Priyamurte Srimati Bhakti Vallabh Tirtha Goswami Namo Namo Vishnupadaya Gaura Prasthaya Bhutale Srimad Bhakti Pramod Puri Goswami Namo Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namo Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pachayani Vishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshataya Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhascha, Kripasindubheva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo. So I'm also praying to all of you for your blessings. So I had a little bit of a short notice before coming to have this talk. And I'm also speaking in front of senior Vaishnavas. And so I'm actually speaking in order to purify myself. And I'm hoping to also please the Vaishnavas like yourself. So the topic is have patience with wisdom. And let me open my notes. So I have a few notes and I'll also be doing some reading from books. So first of all, this is not it. Hold on a second. Here we go. All right. So first of all, there are several different words that. So as we know, Srila Prabhupada translated many books that are texts about our practice of Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of loving devotional service. And in those books, most of them were from Sanskrit, the ancient Indian language, and some of them were from Bengali. And in all of his books, he had the highest standard of scholarship. So he included not only the original text, the original Sanskrit text or Bengali text, as the case may be, but he also included word-for-word synonyms. And there is a website called sanskritdictionary.org where you can find all the synonyms. So you can look up any Sanskrit word and find all the synonyms that. So sometimes the same word is translated in different ways in different contexts. And so you can find all of those synonyms in that. And with a little Google foo, you can also use the same to find all the different Sanskrit words that have been translated for a particular English word. So here are a few of the Sanskrit words that have been translated as patience. And I will actually come to two main meanings that I will speak about. But so the main ones are dhairya, dhriti. So the thing is that in Sanskrit, the words change their form based on how they're used in the sentence. So most of these first words that I'm saying, they're all forms of the same word, which is basically dhriti. And in Sanskrit, words are based on a verbal root. Most words are based on a verbal root, and then they're somehow grammatically changed into a form. So the verbal root is dri, which means to hold. So this gives us the first meaning of patience. The base meaning is to just keep holding on. Hold on. This is what someone often says. Hold on. Please be patient. Hold on. So that's one meaning, which we could say is maybe the main meaning. There's a couple words that I'm not familiar with, so I won't say much about them, like pongsnam and teha. But there's some other interesting words that are also translated as patience, and one of them is kshama. So kshama we often hear as forgiveness, and in one important place, Srila Prabhupada has translated it as patience. So I'll be speaking a little bit more about that. And very interestingly, there's a few words that are translated as patience, which mostly tell us how important patience is and how fundamental it is. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antilila chapter 17, verse 38, chitta is translated as patience. Now, this is a Bengali verse, so I don't know. So sometimes some words, when they come from Sanskrit into Bengali, sometimes the meaning shifts. But it's translated as patience or consciousness, is chitta. And so that's saying that patience is very fundamental. It's fundamental to consciousness itself. And another word of patience is saram. Saram is translated as patience. So it's, when I'm saying translated, I'm saying in the word-for-word synonym. So sometimes in the translation, it's translated differently. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 11, verse 5, patience is translated as saram, and usually saram is translated as essence. So this is telling us that patience is of the essence. And finally, in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 8, Chapter 11, verse 18, patience is translated as sattvam. And usually sattvam is translated as goodness, purity, the lucidity. So this is also telling us that patience is very fundamental to this quality of consciousness. So the first verse I'll read is from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, verse 34. It's a famous verse. Mrityu sarva haraschahan udbhavascha bhavishyatan kirtishu vakchanarina smritir medha dhriti kshama. And so this is very interesting because the synonyms go not quite as one might expect. So I'll read the synonyms. Mrityu, death, sarvahara, all devouring, cha, also, aham, I am, udbhava, generation, cha, also, bhavishyatam, of future manifestations. So this is the first half of the verse. So Shri Krishna is speaking, the Supreme Lord is speaking in this song of God. I am all devouring death, and I am the generating principle of all that is yet to be. Then in the second half of the verse, he talks about qualities. So kirti, fame, shri, opulence or beauty, vak, fine speech, cha, also, narinam, of women, smriti, memory, medha, intelligence, dhriti, firmness, kshama, patience. So the translation is, I am all devouring death, and I am the generating principle of all that is yet to be. Among women, I am fame, fortune, fine speech, memory, intelligence, steadfastness, and patience. So interestingly, the word dhriti that is usually translated as patience also occurs in this verse, but here Srila Prabhupada puts it in the synonyms as firmness and in the translation as steadfastness. So that's the quality of holding on that I just said. But he translates kshama as patience. So this is the second main meaning of patience. So it's a kind of tolerance, and here he's and forgiveness. That's a kshama. And in the purport, he talks about each of these qualities, but I'll just quote what he says about these two qualities. So he says, the ability to overcome unsteadiness is called firmness or steadfastness, dhriti. And when one is fully qualified, yet is humble and gentle, and when one is able to keep his balance both in sorrow and in the ecstasy of joy, he has the opulence called patience, kshama. So this is one place where Srila Prabhupada highlights the quality of patience. So clearly it's a quality that we all want to learn more about and cultivate. So another very prominent place where he talks about patience is in Nectar of Instruction, verse 3. So Nectar of Instruction is Srila Prabhupada's translation of the book Upadeshamrita. So in the 16th century, there's six prominent teachers on the altar on the right here. And one of them was Srila Rupa Goswami. And he wrote this book, Upadeshamrita, which means the nectar of instruction. And this is 11 verses that are very important about mostly about the practice of bhakti yoga. And so this verse 3 says, Utsahan nishchayat dhairyat tat karma pravartanat sangatyagat sato vritte shadbhir bhakti prasiddhyati. And so I won't go through all the word for words, but I'll just say the first three. Utsahat, by enthusiasm, nishchayat, by confidence, and dhairyat, by patience. And then I'll just read the translation. There are 6 principles favorable to the execution of pure devotional service: being enthusiastic, endeavoring with confidence, being patient, acting according to regulative principles such as Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam. This is a quote from Srimad Bhagavatam. Hearing, chanting, and remembering Krishna. Abandoning the association of non-devotees and following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. These 6 principles undoubtedly assure the complete success of pure devotional service. So by the way, I should have mentioned at the beginning that so I see Sharif is new and I see Braven has come a few times. If something I'm saying is not clear, or if you have questions, you can raise your hand, and maybe if I happen to be looking and not, you can even get my attention and please ask questions. I would like this to be clear. So being patient is one of these 6 qualities. And so I'll just read the part of Srila Prabhupada's commentary where he talks about this particular quality, patience. So he says, these activities, the activities of practicing devotional service, must be executed with patience. One should not be impatient in Krishna consciousness. Indeed, this Krishna consciousness movement was started single-handedly by Srila Prabhupada himself. And in the beginning, there was no response. And so he came in 1965 by himself. He was 70 years old, and he was alone in New York in the winter. And it was one of the coldest winters that had been seen in decades. And he was struggling alone. He was in a area of New York called the Bowery, where basically drunkards and drug addicts and very poor people lived. And he had a roommate who was not interested. It was just, for convenience. And he was having no success earlier. So this is what he's talking about. In the beginning, there was no response, but because we continue to execute our devotional activities with patience, People gradually began to understand the importance of this movement, and now they are eagerly participating. One should not be impatient in discharging devotional service, but should take instructions from the spiritual master and execute them with patience, depending on the mercy of Guru and Krishna. The successful execution of Krishna conscious activities requires both patience and confidence. A newly married girl naturally expects offspring from her husband, but she cannot expect to have them immediately after marriage. Of course, as soon as she is married, she can attempt to get a child, but she must surrender to her husband, confident that her child will develop and be born in due time. Similarly, in devotional service, surrender means that one has to become confident. The devotee thinks, Avashya Rakhibe Krishna. Krishna will surely protect me and give me help for the successful execution of devotional service. This is called confidence. So here he's putting patience and confidence together, and he's saying, and he's putting them together with surrender. So we may be seeing that we're acting on a process and we're not seeing any change visible to us. And it may seem like we're not getting any result. So the example he gave is of someone who has to spend 9 months, at least, to wait for a child. But we also have a famous example in the scriptures of a woman named Shabari, who was told by her guru when she was a young girl that the Lord Ramchandra would come and visit her ashram, her place. She lived in somewhat of the wilderness, and she had a place by herself. And her guru told her that. So she was serving her guru originally, and she was very happy. But then her guru had to leave, so then she was just sorrowful. But her guru told her that one day Lord Ramchandra, the Supreme Lord who has descended to earth, will come to your own place, and so you be ready for him. And so she used to prepare her place every day. She used to pick flowers. She used to dust her path. She used to make sure that she had all the fruits, and in case Lord Ramchandra came that day, because she didn't know when he would come. And so she started this when she was a young girl, and she became an old lady. And still, it was actually decades that she did this every single day. And still, even though nothing apparently was happening, Lord Ramchandra hadn't come, she had confidence. She had surrendered to her guru, and she had confidence. And so she continued, and finally one day Lord Ramchandra and Lakshman came, and so fulfilled these desires of her heart. And Srila Prabhupada himself, he talks about his initial coming to New York and how he wasn't originally getting any response. But even before that, so he had taken sannyas in 1955, and he was trying for many years, struggling alone in India, and he didn't get to come to the U.S. until 1965. So already for 10 years he had been, trying, and he had so much patience. So another example, a very important and prominent verse that is quoted very often is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 14, Verse 8. So this is from the prayers of Lord Brahma, and welcome. This is from the prayers of Lord Brahma when he had offended Sri Krishna, and I won't go into that, but it's a very interesting pastime. So Lord Brahma is sometimes called the creator of the universe, but he's actually the secondary creator. He's sort of the engineer, and Lord Krishna is the supreme. But because Lord Brahma is so important, sometimes he gets a little illusioned or bewildered. So this is called the Brahma Vimohan Lila, the time when he was illusioned. So afterward, he realized he had offended Krishna, so he spoke many prayers. And so I'll read the verse and the translation. I actually don't know if this particular verse and translation is by Srila Prabhupada. So this is another example of Srila Prabhupada's patience and determination. So he, in November of 1977, he was in India, Vrindavan, and he was so weak that he was dying. He knew that he was going to leave this world very soon, and yet he continued to translate the Srimad Bhagavatam, because he really wanted as much of that to be translated as possible. So he left during the translation of this chapter. So I'm not sure that he actually that this verse translation is from that time, but this is an example of his patience. That despite his, his suffering, or at least his apparent suffering, his apparent difficulties, he was still patiently translating. So this famous verse goes, Tatte nukampang susamikshmano bhunjanivatma kritam vipakam vidvagvapurbhir vidhan namaste jivetu yo mukti pade sadaya bhak. And so this is a verse that is often very applicable to many of us when we're going through tribulations in life. So Lord Brahma says, My dear Lord, one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy upon him, all the while patiently suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds and offering you respectful obeisances with his heart, words, and body, is surely eligible for liberation, for it has become his rightful claim. So this is when we're going through some suffering. The verse says that eva atmakritang vipakam. We think that this suffering is the result of my past misdeeds, my karma. This is a reaction for something that I've done, which may have even been in some previous life, so I may not even know what I've done. And I'm just patiently waiting for the Lord to be merciful to me, and I'm not like blaming the Lord or getting angry with the Lord. I'm just being patient and waiting for his compassion. So that's a very important aspect of patience. And I won't read this whole purport in the interest of time, but I'll read a little bit of it. The word susamikshmana indicates that a devotee earnestly awaits the mercy of the Supreme Lord even while suffering the painful effects of previous sinful activities. Lord Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that a devotee who fully surrenders unto him is no longer liable to suffer the reactions of his previous karma. However, because in his mind a devotee may still maintain the remnants of his previous sinful mentality, the Lord removes the last vestiges of the enjoying spirit by giving his devotee punishments that may sometimes resemble sinful reactions. So this is one thing that when one enters the devotional path, then Lord Krishna directly takes charge of awarding the sinful reactions or the good reactions. And so it's not, so generally it's actually kind of mechanical. It's like the law of action reaction that we've all heard of, Newton's law, that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So generally it's administered by the celestial bureaucrats of the universe, and it's just straightforward. But Shri Krishna may sometimes so this is law, but Shri Krishna is above law. He's directly taking charge of the life of the devotee, which being the supreme person, he has better things to do than take charge of something mechanical. So usually this is not administered directly by him. But Srila Prabhupada is or someone, his disciples, is explaining here that that in the case of a devotee, he still sometimes awards what seem like sinful reactions, because within the heart, it's sometimes compared that if a fan is going and we switch off the fan, then the fan keeps going for some time because it doesn't stop right away. So similarly, one's sinful mentality may, one's conditioning may still be existing, even if one has made a determination that one wants to practice. And I certainly experienced this, that, and I'm sure many of us have experienced that we have, we believe that we want to become devotees and we want to, love Krishna with all our heart and all our might and all our strength, but then we find that we're actually still weak and we're still pulled in various directions. So that's all I'll read of that purport. That's a famous purport. So now I'll come to the reason for the title of my talk, So this is actually a heading that comes from this very wonderful book by Rabindranath Swami, and it is so wonderful that I will have to manage to get it out of this. Maybe I'll get all these books out at the same time because I'm going to read all of them. I could just put these. Thank you. I'll use it. All right. So this book is called The Journey Within, and this is a really great book. I can recommend it to anyone, no matter their background, and it explains the devotional process in detail in many aspects and in a very accessible way. But the one passage that I want to read is from the chapter called Awakening Divine Love, which is talking about various practices, and especially 5 practices of devotional service. And the one that is talking about in this case is what he calls practice 2, which is spiritual relationships and spiritual community. So what we know as sadhu sangha, so associating with devotees. And so the subheading is have patience with wisdom. So here, so Rabindranath Swami is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, our teacher, and he himself is a great teacher. So he says, but what about seriously offensive behavior? So he spent some time talking about patience and how we should be patient with each other and tolerant. So it's mostly the forgiveness aspect of patience. He says, but what about seriously offensive behavior? Do we overlook it in the name of tolerance? Forgive it? What is a spiritually healthy response to such behaviors? There is nothing spiritual about allowing abuse to occur. Forgiveness does not mean ignoring abuse or letting it go unaddressed. It is not a spiritual quality to remain passive where action may be required to protect the innocent or rectify serious offenders. To apply the balance between justice and compassion requires spiritual maturity and attention to the particulars of a situation. There are so many things in life we are powerless to change. The way others treat us, the weather, the course of a disease, challenges of all sorts cross our path no matter how hard we try to avoid them. Still, we have freedom in how we respond. Reinhold Niebuhr's famous serenity prayer comes to mind. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Good character is a necessary foundation for meaningful, sustainable relationships and for a healthy community. My teacher, meaning Srila Prabhupada, once said, philosophy without good character is practically useless. So there needs to be a balance between patience and tolerance and when not to tolerate. And as he said, I'll just read that part again. To apply the balance between justice and compassion requires spiritual maturity and attention to the particulars of a situation. So the best way to develop that understanding, thank you, of the situation and when to apply patience is from examples. And I actually found a bunch of examples, but I think I don't have time to go through all of them, but I'll just go through a few of them. So, well, maybe I'll just close this so that I can put this here. So this is an example of the first kind of patience. So this is Swami in a Strange Land. It's by Joshua Green, Yogeshwar Prabhu. It's a very, very good book. And actually, as far as I recall, you gave me this book, Prem Vilas Prabhu, so thank you for that. This is one biography of Srila Prabhupada. And so this is at a point, so many of us have heard of the famous first temple that Srila Prabhupada had in New York City. This was 26 2nd Avenue. But this is from a point before even that temple. So this is when Srila Prabhupada had a loft in the Bowery, 94 Bowery. That Bowery was the name of the street. And so he was just having a few students come to that loft. And so it's actually kind of a humorous situation. So a journalist named Smith, a writer for the Village Voice, had come. And so Smith arrived at number 94 and climbed to the top of the stairs. Shoes lined the hallway outside the door to the loft. Smith walked in. Filling the room were people in hippie garb, sitting cross-legged and staring at the walls. Smith tiptoed past them, careful not to disturb their meditations. He noticed an Indian cloth hung like a curtain at the back of the loft. He walked over and peeked behind the curtain and found a man in robes sitting on a cushion and chanting on beads. Swami Bhaktivedanta? Smith asked. Yes? I'm Howard Smith. Excuse me, I'll just take my shoes off. Why do you want to take your shoes off? The Swami asked. I didn't ask you to take your shoes off. So already this is an example of patience that he was. So generally it is the standard that we take our shoes off, but he was tolerating this in the very beginning because he knew that nobody knew about this practice. Smith retied his laces and motioned toward the people staring at the walls in the outer room. What are all those people out there doing? He asked. I don't know, the Swami admitted with surprise. And they don't know what they are doing. I am trying to teach them, but they seem to misunderstand me. They are very confused people. So here's another example of patience. Smith sat, and he and the Swami talked for an hour. The Swami candidly explained that he was new to America and asked Smith for his advice about living in New York. The young reporter found him open-minded and practical, and appreciated the informality of their chat. But he was doubtful when the Swami mentioned having temples all over the world. These temples are there now? Smith asked. So remember, at this point, even 26 Second Avenue wasn't there now in the sense of now. Well, the Swami replied, we have got a long way to go, but I am very patient. And so then he continues talking with the journalist, and he was very patient. And within 12 years, he had more than 108 temples all over the world, not just in the United States. So this is an example of all the different kinds of patience. So it's tolerance and also determination and enthusiasm. And I have a whole bunch more examples, but in the interest of time, I'll just briefly summarize. So this is a very wonderful book by Giriraj Swami, who is another student of Srila Prabhupada and also a great teacher in his own right. And it's called I'll Build You a Temple, the Juhu Story. And it is a very adventurous, amazing story with a lot of twists and turns. And I strongly recommend that people read this book, and probably some of you have read more of this book than I have. But I'll just very briefly summarize that. So this took place in what was then known as Bombay, India, on the western side of India, a very major city, metropolis, now is known as Mumbai. And so Srila Prabhupada had taken some of his American students with him to India and then was trying to purchase land in Bombay. And so there was one person, Mr. Nair, there's actually a couple, Mr. Nair and Mrs. Nair. And Mr. Nair, he met Mr. Nair, and Mr. Nair actually offered this piece of land for sale. He said that he has this piece of land in Juhu. And Srila Prabhupada saw the land and really liked the land and made an agreement to purchase the land in installments. And they set up a legal agreement and everything. And so what was not known to the devotees at that time, but became apparent, was so I'm afraid that I'm spoiling the story, but I'll just many of you have read it in here or elsewhere, that Mr. Nair actually had a habit of selling this land to people under a legal agreement, and the legal agreement required some government permission, and he was in cahoots with people in the government who were corrupt, and so in the end the permission would not come, and then but the money would have already been taken, and then he would sell the same piece of land repeatedly to one person after another. So this was his con game, basically. And also even the devotees found later that even lawyers who they thought were on their side in this agreement were actually also in cahoots. So it was all kinds of shenanigans were going on. So I had all these examples that I was going to take. So I hope I can find the one that that I wanted. So if you'll just be patient after hearing all this, then I'll just find. There's such good examples in here. So there are certainly good examples of how the devotees were being patient. So after selling them the land, he was trying to drive them away from the land. And so Mr. Nair hired a strongly built ruffian named Ramu, the coconut walla, who ostensibly was there to cut the coconuts from the 140 palm trees on the land. And especially during the temple's evening programs, Ramu would position himself near the front of the property and brandish his machete, which is supposedly just for cutting coconuts, looking menacingly at our devotees, insulting women, and trying to intimidate and scare away people who might want to come for prasad or artis, talks or other functions. So this was something that was that they tolerated patiently. So I want to just give one example where it was not a time for patience. So I believe this was after Mr. Nair had expired, but Mrs. Nair was still carrying on the same shenanigans. So in India, the law was a little unclear and vague, but it turned out that possession was 9/10 of the law, and also having a building would on land would be considered very important in a court case. Like if the person who had the building was more likely to retain the land. So the devotees, so they were in an ambiguous situation, although really it wasn't ambiguous legally, but because of all this corruption, it was ambiguous. So then they were trying to get their life members, who were local Indian people, to help them to build a temple. So, and they were, collecting and canvassing from the life members, not just for money, but they also needed materials and workers and help and everything. So they were going through, and so then it says, somehow Mrs. Nair found out what we were planning to do, and the next day, Friday, she went to the High Court with a petition for an injunction to prevent us from rebuilding. It was her property, she argued, and she hadn't given us permission. So then she asked the judge for an injunction. So this was on a Friday. She wanted an injunction to stop us from building. And the judge said, well, I haven't heard both sides of the case, and now it's Friday, so I will hear this on Monday. So then, continuing, when we heard of Mrs. Nair's petition and the judge's response, we knew we had to take advantage of the opportunity. If the judge ruled against us, we would be prohibited from going ahead with the reconstruction. But once the temple was up, we understood an injunction, even if it were granted, would be meaningless. The temple would already be in place and no rebuilding would be necessary. We figured we had the weekend until Monday morning to put up the structure. So the next day, he called his friend Sushil Asnani, who was the lawyer for the Bhaktawar construction company, and this person arranged for materials. So they needed sand, bricks, cement, and then they also had someone whose business was sweet shops, who also had a building who was also a building contractor, and then they had people who got cement. And in particular, I'll just so this event is a bit long, but I'll say that there was one person named Mr. Sethi, who was who had seen. So by the way, I'm not going through this incident, but they had a small shed that had been demolished before, and that was horrific, and that was definitely not a time for tolerance. So although they were all resisting at that time, they were taken to jail by the corrupt police people. So anyway, Mr. Sethi had seen that, and he was horrified. So he came and helped them. So then there was someone named Matre, who was one of on the opposing side, So Matre too demanded that we halt the construction. No, Mr. Sethi replied. Why should we stop? You can build it up, Matre threatened, but I will come in the night with 50 gundas, hooligans, and break it down. And Mr. Sethi turned to his son who was by his side and said, Brij Mohan, bring my revolver and my rifle. Then he said to Matre, don't bring 50 gundas, bring 100, bring 200. I have 250 cartridges. You'll have to bring at least 251. So he had a Kshatriya side and he was staunch. And so he and his son, they stayed all night in the rain, and they were in the rain while that construction was happening. And so so at the end of this passage, Giriraj Swami says that a few days earlier, a prominent devotee whom he admired very much, he says, by whom I was greatly inspired, had passed through Bombay. I appreciated his humble and gentle demeanor, and I wanted to emulate him. When Tamal Krishna, who was another senior person there who was also in helping to lead that effort, when Tamal Krishna told me to stay up all night and oversee the work, I mentioned how I wanted to be like this other devotee, a simple, humble sadhu. So this, he wanted to be patient and tolerant. Tamal Krishna looked me straight in the eyes and with a firm intensity and controlled anger responded, your humility will be to stay up all night and make sure this temple gets rebuilt. I thought about it and I had to agree. Where was the humility if I was not ready to surrender to the order or desire of the spiritual master? If I would have retired for the evening so I could get up early and be a good devotee and chant my rounds, which wasn't bad, I wouldn't really have been humble. It was more humble to submit to the authority and do the needful for Srila Prabhupada's service. To be humble meant to be ready without personal consideration to do whatever the spiritual master wanted, whether or not it conformed to popular conceptions of a humble sadhu. So that's all I'll read from this book, but there's, as you can see, all my little stickies, there's many, many examples of patience, and not just patience, but many other amazing qualities. And this book can really help to make those qualities real in us, because sometimes if we read about Srila Prabhupada was so amazing that he's out of this world. Like he's, he was clearly a pure devotee from the beginning of his birth. But, in books by his disciples, we also read about they're very candid about their struggles and their journeys and how they were learning. And so that can be very inspiring for us. So with that, I want to again ask for your, thank you for your attention, and ask for your blessings so that I also can have patience with wisdom. And we have a little bit of time for questions. Or reflections. Yes?
I have one that how does the very important and knowing that something doesn't
Oh, well, thank you for your kind encouragement. I actually felt very bewildered because I was supposed to speak the next week and I had a little bit of a short notice. So.
I hope
No. It'll be better.
Second question is that I always think that when I think of patience, most of the time I become lazy. I don't keep hold on to my patience for it. People coming to patience, how to be patient.
Yeah, so that's why that Nectar of Instruction verse, number 3, is very helpful, both the verse and the purport, where these three things go together. Utsahat, Nishchayat, Vairayat. So Utsahat is enthusiasm, Nishchaya is, sometimes it's sometimes translated as determination, but here it's also, Srila Prabhupada talks about it as confidence, and Vairayat is patience. So these three go together. And so yes, I guess it takes some reflection, but especially if it's if it's an order of the guru, then of course one has to continue being patient. But yes, and it also takes sometimes, as Radhanath Swami said, it also takes some spiritual maturity and to judge when is it that we're not putting enough effort, and when is it that we actually just need to be patient. And sometimes it may be that we actually also have to see that something may be in our plan, but it's not in Krishna's plan. So at some point we may need to adjust. So another thing that is in that book, Nectar of Instruction, is about guhyam akhyati prichyati, that devotees have relationships with each other, and in some of them we ask in confidence and we respond in confidence. So so it's good to have spiritual friends and preferably a mentor, so we can have some guidance. So yeah, I'm sorry, that's probably not very specific, but it's hard to give a general guideline. But yes, also I think there's a verse in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita about how one has to have both enthusiasm and also be equal in success and failure. So so that being equal in success and failure is kind of an aspect of patience, but one has both of those are qualities of the mode of goodness. Thank you. Anyone else?
I have a question. When preparing for the class,
How did you came up with the sources, and what inspired you to look at certain sources versus others?
So the verses that I said at the beginning, they're all very famous verses. I guess what inspired me was I actually opened the Journey Within and found that section and on how patience with wisdom. So that was the inspiration for the class. And yeah, those three verses I think are the most famous verses. The one from Bhagavad Gita, the one from Nectar of Instruction, and the one from the Brahmastava from Srila Prabhupada. And then, so this, well, I mean, Srila Prabhupada's life is full of, patience and enthusiasm. It's a very, good example. And yeah, I just remembered this story already. So I actually haven't finished reading this book, but I knew that there was a lot. And actually, I knew already just from what I knew of the story that there was patience and also, the time for not patience was both in this story. And then actually, there's so much more. So that was the inspiration. So basically, what little I already knew. But yes, I was lucky to find that story of Smith. I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah.
What are they doing? I don't know. So it was somewhat spontaneous. I don't know if that's a very satisfying answer. Okay, so I think it's time for the arati. So thank you again for your attention.